Welcome to the Happy Market Research Podcast, your favorite place for strategies, stories, and insights from the world of market research. Brought to you by your host, Dan Fleetwood.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Happy Market Research Podcast. Today, my guest is Aarti Bhaskaran. She is the Global Head of Research and Insights at Snap. Aarti, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan.
Awesome. So for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what your current role is at Snap.
So I have been in the world of research for coming up to 19 years. I feel old. Started my career in India, and I've been lucky enough through the course of my career to move across countries. So India is where I started, but also move across specializations in research. So I've started with innovation research, went on to do a lot of brand creative strategy work, moved into the world of media. When I moved to Canada, in between I was in Singapore, did media measurement, learned the world of attribution and MMM, and then moved to the US where I took up the role for Snap. So at Snap, essentially what I do is I lead the research and insights practice. It's focused a lot on external thought leadership around understanding audiences, what do they do around moments, ad products, obviously, whether it's video, augmented reality, creators, and now even our chat, and basically telling stories around bigger topics for the industry, as well as why Snap, to arm sales, marketing, comms with messaging to market.
So a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything. That's what keeps things interesting,
Yeah. And don't feel bad about being in the industry for 19 years. I'm right there with you. So don't, it's not that bad, I say, We're still young. Cool. Well, I wanted to dive into two things that I know you had mentioned that Snap does really well and does a lot of research around both the generational use of social media and then also augmented reality and its impact on word of mouth marketing. So if we can first dive into the generational use, what research has Snap done on that? And how do you guys think about that in terms of differences between generations and so forth? Like, what are some interesting things there?
Oh gosh, that can take a whole week. Only because 90% of Gen Z are on Snap, so automatically the 13 to 24-year-olds become a very important audience group for us to research. And I always say, there are some people who believe in generational marketing, some do not. But what I have noticed over my years in the industry is every 20 years or so, you're impacted by the macro political, socio-economic situation. And that kind of shapes, people who are going through different life stages from student to working to, when you're established in your careers. And that gets reflected in generations. And a lot of the work that we do around Gen Z is really trying to understand them, because every generation has certain core values that are true to who they are, kind of define that generation. But it also has a lot of implication on how they consume media, what's their expectation from brands, how they shop. And those are all the areas in which we have done a lot of work. From a shopping perspective, COVID kind of accelerated this trend, but it's really caught more among Gen Z. Is e-commerce accelerated? Yes, but it's also the acceptance of tools like chatbots or augmented reality lenses to shop for the things that you want, right? And the expectation of seamlessness. I think the older generations are oh, I'm okay if something's out of stock, or if the site is not. If I click on an ad that I see, it doesn't really go to the site, that's okay. But Gen Z are less forgiving. For them, seamlessness is one of those dimensions which is critical. Similarly with media consumption, the entire growth of short form consumption is driven by this generation because they grew up with the phone. Unlike other generations who kind of got it when they were older, so behaviors were already settled, and it's more of a change. It doesn't mean millennials don't consume short form content, don't get me wrong, but most of the trend in terms of the length, the attention paid, etc., starts with this generation and then it moves up. So that's something that we study a lot, because obviously that has implications for a platform like Snap. And then the other interesting thing, that we've studied is the kind of content that different generations gravitate to. And one thing we noticed is we call Gen Z like the imperfect generation, because the millennials were it's the first time, they had platforms like Instagram or, access to being able to take digital photos where you could Photoshop to your heart's content. Whereas this generation is more of, I want to see the unfiltered, almost
Oh,
going
really?
back to the pre-digital, when you
Yeah.
had film and you took a photo, you don't know how you look like. So a lot of what they're posting that we're starting to realize now is um, the classic example I always do is when you take photos of food, the millennial photo will be like a camera up above and the food's not yet consumed, right? It's just been like to a table in a restaurant. Whereas the Gen Z photos, when the meal's been consumed and there are like dirty plates, that's more real.
Right.
Or
Right.
a little bit more blurry and things like that. So we're seeing like the start of more imperfections being used. It doesn't mean they still don't use filters. They do it when there's, message with friends and so on. But we're
Right.
starting to see that trend kind of creep in. So those are all the things, that we've studied about this generation.
Yeah, that's interesting. The filter one is interesting to me because I always feel like, and maybe this is I'm dating myself here, but when like Instagram or Snap when they first came out, it was all about filters. I felt like and different things, but now it's kind of like a reverse back, not to have filters, which is kind of interesting too. So yeah.
It is. It is. I think filters, which have now become lenses, because technology has
Mm-hmm.
evolved so much. So it's
Mm-hmm.
augmented reality lenses where you can do more than just have like a smooth skin filter on you.
Right.
It's almost become like a tool that you use to communicate. And right now, what we are seeing is a lot of generative AI lenses becoming popular, where you could like imagine yourself as something fantastical, or how you would look in your 80s, and so on. So
Mm-hmm.
it's almost now being used as a form of self-expression, which is a value that's very important for this generation.
Yeah.
If
Interesting.
Gen Xers were all about put your head down, hard work pays off, millennial was all about striving for success. Gen Z is all about everything is a learning experience. As long as I'm authentic and being true to who I am,
Right.
and that's
Right.
also getting reflected in how they buy and how they consume media. So we have looked at like over like 10, 12 years of filter now lens usage, and you could see the evolution. I always open with, we're not about vomiting rainbows and puppy dog ears. I think that's what was the iconic
Yeah, that's true.
association with Snap of
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
years ago. But now it's really about you could place yourself in a location and share that experience. You can play a game in the lens. So it's become a lot more about a message that you want to convey using technology.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess it makes sense, like sort of the evolution of it, right? And filters to lenses and so forth. In terms of augmented reality, I know you had mentioned that it kind of helps drive word of mouth marketing. What do you mean by that? And what research have you done around
Yeah.
augmented reality and that word of mouth marketing?
Yeah, so we had a question last year, and this is one of my fun aspects of my job, because like Snap is one of those innovative platforms, and we are pioneer of lenses. We do a lot of work around augmented reality that not many people do. So we are usually the first to ask the question, or the first to even think of a methodology to research, especially in the world of media. Maybe gaming is a bit different. So one of the things we were talking about is okay, lenses are being used for people to play around, but we also know a lot of lenses are being shared. We see it on the platform. So we want to understand, why is it that people share? What makes them share? Is it like just as a form of communication or informing? Is it like word of mouth? What is it? What are the triggers? And does sharing actually have impact on any kind of brand outcomes? Because end of the day, these lenses are an ad product for us, and we want to drive ad revenue. So we were thinking about the brief and what we should do. Then we spoke to our partners, our alter agents, and decided, why don't we take a step back and make it broader and see if word of mouth or sharing is changing, right? And how people share. in terms of content. And that was really like the genesis of the study. And what we realized is that a lot of people share, and sharing has almost become a way in which it's not just sharing about new information, hey, check out this new video, or, this new brand. It's almost become a way to convey emotion, right? And that is especially true on a platform like Snap, where you're snapping with your friend and the snapping is very visual. So we've kind of realized that. And we also realized that people share different things for different purposes. So lenses are usually shared, when you want to connect with somebody, and you want them to experience whatever you're experiencing. Whereas, you share a lot of video that's more informational, right? You share links because you want to take a decision and you want people to check something out and tell yay or nay. So that's why we're like, word of mouth used to be, you'll talk to your friends, maybe text them, you'll call them back in the day of landlines, you'll hang out in the mall and ask your opinion. It's just now evolved into using technology as word of mouth. And what we realized is that the sharing actually leads to more stronger brand outcomes. So it would be, the implication basically for advertisers is, when you're thinking of any kind of campaign, it should not just be, hey, I have created a video that lands a message. Would you be able to introduce certain kind of features or elements in either your video, or if you're using augmented reality, that will enable people to share, so that it leads to a more richer brand experience, because it does increase share rate, does lead to more favorability for the brand, but it also leads to more like lower funnel outcomes for brands.
Interesting. There's actually a lot there with the lenses. I didn't think about it as a term or as a form of like expression, right? Of like, hey, I'm experiencing this and I want you to experience it too. And you're kind of bringing your friends in. That's an interesting aspect of it. I like that. Yeah.
Other aspect of it is technology has advanced so much that the try-on technology has now become so good. That there are a lot of people actually share stuff they have tried on, whether it's glasses or a jacket or earrings or a makeup, with their friends to get their opinion. So there's some amount of utility as well now in augmented reality that kind of enables sharing as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I guess previously you would have taken a picture of yourself and something right in a mirror and like shared it, but now you can just do it with augmented reality. That's pretty cool, actually. I didn't think about that aspect of it, but that's good. How are you doing in terms of like a little more tactical? How are you doing these studies? Are you doing more qualitative or is it quantitative work? What does that look like?
I would say that we are very, very much mixed methodology because for me, it's always the brief that guides the research and the methodology. So it really depends on what's the outcome, what we are looking at, and what are we researching, and among whom. So obviously, if it's a topic or a subject that's a little bit more nuanced or something we've not done before, we do start with a lot of ethnography, or sometimes we were talking about a beauty category and lenses, and we decided to do like these friendship duos, because then they play off each other and they talk very passionately about the topic. But also I have to supply stats to external parties, right, to marketing. So a lot of work is quantitative. We also do a lot of neuroscience work. We work a lot with first party data or meta-analysis of campaigns, that we run. So I'm lucky enough in the sense that I have people on my team who are specialized and talented in different areas, because there are some who come from a qualitative brand background, some who come from a measurement background. So we kind of put our skills together to develop our roadmap and methodologies.
Yeah, so you have to do a little bit of everything. That's good. Yeah. I like it. Cool. Anything else on Gen Z research or augmented reality that you think is interesting that you'd like to share?
Oh my gosh, there's like so much we can talk about those two. I would say the other surprising element of Gen Z that we have discovered is, I would say, the like processing power. So there's a lot of clickbaity headline around how attention span is declining, right? And that younger generations have lower attention span. Technically, it's true. And our research also proved it. But
Right.
what our research showed is just because they're paying less attention in terms of time doesn't mean that they're not paying attention to whatever it is that they're watching,
Oh,
right? Whatever
interesting.
it is that they're consuming. So the processing power is higher, because of which, if you can capture somebody's Gen Z's attention in like the first few seconds, say up 4, maybe up to 8 seconds, then you would be able to make an impact. Because in those few seconds, their attention paid is higher than other generations. But after that, it just dips
Oh,
drastically.
interesting.
Yeah, but I
Interesting.
think yeah, I also think it's because of, again, the environment in which they grew up, right? They grew up when platforms were getting established, when social was becoming a thing, when
Yep.
content shrank from an hour-long TV show to, like 30-second, 15-second clips. I think that's also probably, this is my hypothesis, is probably, in influencing how they process information.
So do you see this going to other generations as well, or is it primarily Gen Z where like, is like Gen X now catching on to the trend of,
Yeah.
hey, you got to process things quicker and you don't get the, the 5-10 minutes or even 30 minutes that you used to get? Do you see it going across generations, or is it specific to Gen Z?
No, so what we observe is, so Gen Z might be like the starter of the trend, but younger millennials come a close second in terms of following, followed by like older millennials. So, the entire second screening, paying more attention to smaller screen,
Yep.
enjoying shorter form, or even discovering like shows or sports first on social through a creator, through the, sports person, and then following the league or the match live or on the big
Yep.
screen. All of that you see a lot from Gen Z, but you also see all the younger millennials kind of following that trend, but to a
Right.
lesser extent, and then the millennials to a lesser extent, like the older millennials. So you do see, and I start to suspect that when Gen Alpha are coming into their own and they have their own thing, you're going to see, similar ripple effect.
Right.
But some behavioral things like attention, really not so much, because it's kind of ingrained in how
True.
you
Yep.
consume. So when we did the attention research, obviously Gen Z was super high and then fell. The
Right.
millennial and the Gen Xers were like more steady decline, which is what you would expect from any human. We can't like maintain our attention throughout. But
Interesting. Huh.
yeah, the extent and the turning point changes by each generation.
That makes sense. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot there for sure.
Yeah.
So, um, awesome. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and go more broad and talk about just the industry overall and some different trends there. What's sort of the biggest challenge you've seen in market research, say over the past year or the past few years?
Apart from like doing more with less, which I think has been the issue for,
Yeah, that's true.
gosh, uh, more than a decade. I would say, that is it? I don't know if it's a challenge, but definitely it's been a demand of the function to get closer to revenue and show impact.
Yeah,
And I always say, doctors make the worst patients, researcher makes the worst, like, people to talk about impact and measure
that's true.
themselves and
That's a good
understand what
point.
they do.
Right.
I think because we're not as close to revenue, we work in the back and we influence marketing, we influence comms, we influence sales. So it's quite hard to measure influence. But we need to do it. Otherwise, my budgets are shrinking, my headcounts are getting lost or frozen. I'm not getting anything additional. Especially when times are tough. Everybody is asking for returns. You see it in the stock market as well. It's no longer about revenue, but it's also about EBITDA, right? It's also about
Yep.
profitability.
Yep.
So I think that's been like one of the biggest challenge, and I don't think we're prepared for it as an industry. To be able to stand up and say this is our value, and I think we need to do a better job of it in terms of what value that we bring.
What do you think are some strategies for, or how to do a better job in terms of bringing the value and be able to back it up with revenue? Is there anything that you found that's worked well for you?
It's a lot of work, and I think that's why
Yeah,
people have shied away from it before.
it's a good point. Yeah.
And I have been on all sides. I have been on the research agency side. I've been in the media agency. You're in the middle, and now I'm at a platform where I'm like the insights function within a company, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like the ones who are the research agency, you're selling research, so you're closer to revenue. Media agency was tougher, but you could get away with it saying, hey, the client account is growing, they're bringing in revenue, and I must have influenced it to a certain extent. But when you're inside an organization, inside a brand, I think it's, first of all, defining your KPIs is very important. But the KPI shouldn't be I delivered this project. And you got to stick your
Right.
neck out and say, hey, if this is the most important revenue driver that the company is going after, this is how my project ladders up to that revenue driver. And then you put in place like some hard metrics that you want to track to be able to get there. Are the
Yeah.
systems always in place to measure it? Not really. So sometimes I do have to, apply the same methodologies, right? The principle of attribution to our work
Right.
and,
Right.
and to get it done. But it's like relentless focus on understanding how our work is used by stakeholders, I think is important. Because
Yeah, that's good.
often we are in the mindset of there's a problem, I solve it, I ship it, I move on. But in our case, once we ship it, we linger on to like measure the impact.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point of matching the research to those key drivers, right? That are revenue focused. So that's a good tip for sure. In terms of, market researchers, and what do you think is something that they often get wrong, and or how can they improve? What do you think there?
Oh, um, I would say that often, look, we are all problem solvers. And I think sometimes that gets us into trouble in the sense that we're like, oh, X, like salesperson or marketing person, you have this issue. All right, I've written the brief. I'm going to get this study done. You'll have the results in 2 weeks. Here you go.
Yep.
You focus so much on the methodology and all of that. But I think you really need to take a step back and say, why do you want to do this? Because often the request we get is, oh, I need stats about parents, or I need to test this creative or something like that. And they come to you with the research question, but really you need to take a step back and understand the business question. Even people come and ask us, we want research about like Gen Alpha. I'm like, why? For what purpose? Is it like thought leadership? Are we going after this group? What's like bothering you or keeping you up at night? And I think that leads to more richer briefs. And often the brief won't be the question that they came to you with.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And I find it even with partners we work with, right? We send a brief and immediately they jump to what's the methodology, what's the scope. But instead of taking a step back and answering what's the business question, that's one. And the other one is, and this has been like years and years of conditioning that I've had that I need to break as well, is uh, nobody has the time to appreciate research apart from researchers,
Oh, that's a good point, actually. Yeah.
and I think we need to be realistic in terms of, we always say know your audience, present accordingly, but often we linger a lot on the findings and don't spend enough time on the implication. Or we feel a need to like present everything so that people can come to their conclusion.
Right.
So often, and that's been like a change in mindset for us as to what is it, why should people spend 15 minutes, not more than that, because nobody's paying attention on the work that you're presenting, not because of the brilliance of methodology, but because of what you're telling them they need to do out of it.
Right.
So that's been like a shift. And I feel there are practitioners who do it well. And then there's a lot of people who do not, and who like put everything out there for you to like pick and choose.
Right. Right. It's easy to fall into the trap of sort of death by PowerPoint, right? Where everything is just these charts and things, but it might be nice for researchers, but whoever you're presenting it to, senior leadership or other people, they don't, I mean, I shouldn't say they don't care. They do care, but they just don't have the time to go through it all. So you have to really
Yeah.
summarize it down and get the main points to them.
Which is why the two are connected, because if you had taken a step back and understood the business question, then that's what you'd be addressing at the end of it.
Right.
And I feel like with all of the changes in industry, especially with with AI coming,
Yeah.
like that's the value we need to offer. Otherwise, everybody is going to think that they can do research, right? Brand marketers think they can do it, comms think they can do it, but really it requires skill to be able
Yeah.
to ask the right question in a right way and to dig through all of the noise to figure out the new so what for somebody. And I feel like that's a skill that we need to flex and flex more. Otherwise, everybody's going to think AI can do it, because AI can
Right.
also spit facts, right?
Yep. Yeah. No, that's a great piece of advice for sure. What is there a book, podcast, or resource that has helped shape the way you think about market research or has helped you out in your career journey?
Ooh. There isn't, I say there isn't one specific things. It's maybe a series of small things.
Yeah.
And it's also like, a couple of people that I've worked with and I really admire.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I would say that one of my early influences was, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Duarte, like the School of Design,
Yep.
who really think about applying design principles to interpreting research results. So it was the first time, it was back in the day, it was the first time I really gave thought to how you deliver what you are doing, not just what you are delivering, and how much the way you present, what you highlight, all of that matters.
Right.
So every now and then, I make sure that whichever team I was leading across many agencies do a session with the design thinking, because I think it's necessary to tell that kind of story. Then I like to follow certain like methodologists for research, because I feel like it's soon going to be a lost art. Whether it's like Ray Pointer and there's John Poulson.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at what they post, or I attend a couple of their sessions, and mostly I try to take some inspiration outside of research as well. When I look at like your startup pitch decks, which are really beautifully packaged,
Right.
and trying to put their value proposition and what they're trying to sell, or a really great speaker. This is why I love to like attend events and
Mm-hmm.
be inspired by somebody who's telling a story, you know
Right.
because
Yep.
I think that also make what separates like a good from a great researcher. So one is that a solid methodology, but the two is how do you bring to life from a storytelling perspective, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
visual or auditory.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like the storytelling piece, and then actually one thing I never thought about is the startup pitch decks, because if you think about it, they have a limited amount of time to get the most impactful information across, right? And how are they doing
Yeah.
it? So that's a great tip, and I do love Ray Pointer as well. So shout out to him. Awesome. Hey, Artie, this has been super interesting. If people want to connect with you or learn more about your work, where should they go? Is LinkedIn the best spot?
LinkedIn is the best spot. I try to
Okay.
post a lot of our work with my own point of view that need not necessarily reflect Snap. And we do a lot of interesting work. Today, we just touched upon Gen Z and augmented reality, but we do a lot of work on creators that I speak about. A lot of work around how holiday and gifting is changing.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and now we'll be doing a fair amount of work in generative AI and its impact on advertising. So if you want to like catch all that, and most of the work that I do is public, it would be on LinkedIn.
Well, hey, Artie, thank you so much, and appreciate you joining the show today.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks, everyone. If you like this, please feel free to subscribe and share it. That's the best way to get the word out.